He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Tēnā koutou irirangi te motu I te pūtia tautoko kārawe.
Kia ora. My name is Moana Maniapoto. In this podcast series, The Negotiators, we meet the gutsy characters who steered their tribes through a minefield of complex treaty settlement negotiations. These are their stories. As a university student with a flash computer and her mother fighting to reclaim tribal land, Ella Henry naturally became Secretary of Everything. Upon the passing of her mother, Ella took up her mother's baton with the Ngāti Kahuki Whangaroa treaty claim, lodged in 1987. Unexpectedly, she found herself going up not just against the Crown, but sometimes her own relatives.
Ranfurly was the Governor-General in the early part of the 20th century. He'd sailed up to the Whangaroa Harbour, he'd had a picnic on a beautiful beach, and he'd said to his officials, wouldn't it be wonderful if the local natives would give us a small piece of this beautiful land that we could use for the public to come and enjoy picnics like I am. So his government officials went away and took the whole peninsula.
We're Māori, and we won't get justice till we've got a Māori flag.
Today, we are strong enough and honest enough to learn the lessons of the last 150 years.
You have not honored the treaty.
And to admit that the treaty has been imperfectly observed.
We were never going to get it back in fee simple because it's part of the Dock Conservancy, but we would get statutory recognition of it. What was interesting is that under the 2007 regime, they would give us the eastern end of the peninsula and the western end of the peninsula, but not the bit in the middle, which made no sense. But we were all suffering from negotiation fatigue then. So we said, oh, all right. And it wasn't until Chris Finlayson became the minister and came back to talk to us in 2013. We were at a hui in Kaitaia, and we were saying, can we please have the whole peninsula? And he looked to his officials and said, why did we only give them the beginning and the end of the peninsula? And everybody went, he said, well, for God's sake, give them the peninsula.
Local kaumātua and resident historian Rawiri Henare recalls this time.
And he said to our kaumātua wakatua, he said, I give it all back to you.
What we found out afterwards, though, is that in that period, Doc was actually investigating giving mining rights. And the middle of our peninsula could well have been the target for some of those mining rights. Ngāti Kahuki Whangaroa is such a tiny little tribe. We don't even have a shop. But that is in many ways a strength, because what it means is that the land is still pristine and the harbours are still pristine. As part of our treaty settlement, we found out that unlike many other tribes, we did not lose our land through Crown action. We lost it through Crown inaction. They did not protect us when one of our neighbouring tribes, who shall remain nameless, sold our whole rohe to a group of white people back in the 1830s. And when they moved in the 1840s and we went, oi, what you fellas doing here? They talked about how they had bought the land from somebody who wasn't even from there. So we immediately wanted to ensure that we were protected when the land commissions began in the 1840s. Unfortunately, the judge at the time got a bit wete afraid because of the wars that were going on up there, so he didn't sit in our area. So generations of Pākehā moved onto the land because they genuinely believed they had purchased this land legally. They had not. We began sending petitions off, and, you know, there are examples of petitions going from the 1860s onwards to Parliament saying, please stop this. And when the Crown didn't intervene, we did up what I think Māori people have done throughout the generations. We adapted. I grew up in a family that was supremely not political. We did not talk about the treaty. We did not talk about the declaration. I often heard them talking about the whenua, and I often heard them talking about the mamae, but was never couched in terms of a discussion about the Treaty of Waitangi or the Declaration of Independence. In 1960, we moved to Auckland. We were like the, Beverly Hillbillies, except without the oil money. We hopped in the truck and moved from Pukapura Road in Kaitaia to Portage Road in New Lynn. And basically at the same time, so did half of Kaitaia, so I had almost the same neighbours. Dad worked at the tanneries and Mum worked at the potteries, and we lived in between. And so I was part of that generation that just grew up in a Māori world. I literally did not know any white people until I came to Auckland. Well, apart from headmaster at Ahipara Native School. Whereas once we came to the city, my parents were very deferential around white people. They'd been well colonised. So we'd already inculcated the rules as small children of engagement with white people. I remember my mum and dad were quite actively involved with the Māori Community Centre. There would always be lengthy debate. It would always end up on talking about grievances, land loss, in terms of a rallying cry for action. That came with the younger generation. My father, who's my link to Ngāti Kauki Whangaroa, died in 1975. It was actually my mother. Even though she's Ngāti Kuri, she was the one who would go to all the meetings because she was, one of the last left alive of that generation who remembered the aunties and uncles from the 1800s who sent the petitions off. The biggest thing that we were trying to achieve in the 90s was a sense of unity, getting the different marae to all agree to be part of one body. That took years. I certainly remember a high level of unified purpose that for me was really gratifying, because we were seeing our aunts and uncles in a different light as noble warriors, even though they were toothless old karaua and queer standing up and just waxing lyrical. It's a joy to behold things like that. And so many of them are gone now that those are the abiding memories I have of what got me involved in the meetings and what has kept me involved since. The original claim Y116 was lodged in 1987 by my cousin Peter Pangari.
I started when I was 40. I'm now 77, going on to 78 soon, after 37 years. Very, very few claimants survive from beginning to end.
He was one of those people who would take the old people to meetings. And part, I think that was because he actually had a good car and a business and a fax and a phone, which back in the 80s was a big deal.
They went through a lot. They lost their land. They lost a certificate of title through the Native Land Court in those early days.
He was so passionate about their mamae, their pain, that he went off and did a course at Auckland University in Māori land law in the 1980s, where he met a young lawyer called Richard Hawke, and Peter Pangari and Richard Hawke together began the journey that became Y116.
And all those lands that are owned by Crown or administered by Crown, I put an injunction on all of them.
We still had a very small group of my parents' generation left alive. They were hugely excited and empowered by the fact that finally we were going to have these old take, these old mamae addressed.
Chris Finlayson was the Minister of Treaty Negotiations at the time.
The tribunal found numerous Crown actions had breached the treaty, causing significant prejudice, including land loss, tribal dispersal, the attendant social collapse, and the burden of grievances borne down through the years.
I was coming up to my 50th birthday and I had a mini crisis because I thought I should go home and save my people. So in 2004, I moved back to Taitokoro and got much more actively involved, and that's when the negotiations began. I realised after a year that I missed Auckland, so I came back. The The reality was the negotiations happened in boardrooms in Auckland and Wellington. Very little of it occurred back home. One of the best things for me about being a negotiator was because I had worked in and around universities for 15 years by that time. I'd been a student for nearly 20 years at that stage, so, you know, reading is my jam. I love reading. The best part of this was being able to read all of those reports. The number of times I would be sitting reading something and I would just be crying because I could hear the voice of my tupuna coming through their pleas for justice. That was a privilege. But then you go to Hui and nobody else had read anything. We had meetings before each meeting where we would come up with a strategy. Then we would go into the meeting and the strategy would go out the window, and it was very difficult to stick to a negotiation plan. And then sometimes when the last of the old fellas were around and they'd come to the meetings and we'd say, right, Matua, now remember you're going to do the karakia and then we're going to have this meeting and then you can ask some questions. And they go, aye. And then they'd slide straight from the karakia into a fight corridor that would take up half of our meeting time, sharing the lament, I te reo Māori, which nobody on the other side could actually understand. But they felt better afterwards. What is really interesting about being a negotiator, so much of it is dependent on your tribe and tribal dynamics. If you have a sound infrastructure to your tribe, then you've probably got very explicit guidelines. If you have a negotiator who's already a recognised, highly regarded leader across the tribe, you've already got the mana, if you like. But if in our tribe it was very small, a number of the marae who were represented on the trust board didn't really have much infrastructure. There was no template beyond the one created by the Crown, and that's the dangerous vacuum created for some tribes. You end up just doing what the Office of Treaty Settlements tells you to do. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just another grievance.
Peter Pangari had done years of research for the claim, but wonders why the government always asks so much of the claimants.
What I can't get over is why. Why should we be put in a position of researching our own whenua when in actual fact we should be telling them, how did you get this land?
I spent a lot of time negotiating with the historian who kept wanting to change perceptions of our neighbouring iwi who'd sold off our land because she'd been part of the history group that had written their treaty claim. The Office of Treaty Settlements is such a political vehicle that when the government changes and the minister changes, almost everything changes. We've survived 3 ministers and as a tribe, and each of them has had a completely different approach to what's happened. What was the most problematic for me was the actual sitting down across the table from representatives of the Office of Treaty Settlements. At the end of the day, they're still the Crown. You're negotiating with the Crown about the grievances against the Crown. And they wonder why we get grumpy with them. The hardest and saddest part has been watching the breakdown of the relationships between and among the marae, and then watching disputes within whānau and family units within those communities.
Kaumātua Rawiri Henare witnessed the division that the settlement created.
It's been a long and hard hikoi, working with the families, trying to benefit all, rather than just some of the family that's on the whenua now wants it just for them. That's where the real difficulty is, even now for our new trustees.
In the early 2000s, that a couple of other families felt that they disagreed vehemently with who was represented, who was elected. It took me right through until we signed the agreement in principle to realise that I'm not even sure if it mattered who had been part of the negotiation. They were just unhappy with the process, and they had every right to be, but I felt really bruised by some of the negativity we encountered at meetings at Hui. None of the negotiators were particularly happy with the outcome, but one of the things that I learnt along the way is whatever you get in a negotiation, nobody in your tribe is going to think it was enough anyway. At the end of the day, we're not going to get private land back, and that's how we lost a great mass of the land.
Motukahakaha, that beautiful beach. I started off with only 11 acres at the park at least. So when they put the notes on, they added another couple of notes to make it 1,100. But because it all turned into general land, we couldn't get it back. That's another sad part.
We were never going to get a significant settlement because there was no massacre involved, and we were a very small tribe, and we had a very small physical tribal boundary. The treaty settlement process shouldn't be allowed to be called a settlement because it doesn't actually settle anything. It's a treaty grievance process that sometimes creates more grievances than it settles. Michael Cullen, the minister at the time, flew in by helicopter to Taimaro to sign the agreement in principle. And there was a small but vocal group of protesters there, and they moved out towards the minister.
Sort of like a kind of mini Gallipoli landing. I mean, we kind of arrived here on this beach, and here are these people massed in front of us, and we've got to get up to the hill up there.
And my sister and 3 of the other queer who were there accompanying the minister were just standing in front of him as they moved forward.
And there was this group determined to stop us.
Who the hell do you think you are, you white? Coming here to sign out.
We had no memory of these people turning up to any of our hui over the previous 10, 15 years, but they felt they had a right to go there and disrupt the signing.
Parekura Horomia was the Minister of Māori Affairs at the time and was aware of the internal tensions, but his job was to oversee the return of land, not to become involved in the tribe's divisions.
Kare whakaia wetahi kia wetahi, e ki takano tātou te pakanga o tahu kāinga, kei rātou tērā. Engari I reira ke tātou, e piranga I te whakahoki aka no te wena nā te nui o rātou e whakaia. Engari I roti a wetahi, tō rātou wehewe, kei rātou tērā.
But I will never forget how shaken, a 70-year-old woman being spat on and sworn at because she's upholding her duties as a queer on this land.
But, I mean, there was no choice but to fly back out.
After the agreement in principle was signed, I resigned from the negotiating team. I was happy if I never had to deal with that particular group of people ever again. I was asked by the newly constituted trust board members to come back, and so I was part of that second negotiation, which took us to the deed of settlement.
Peter Pāngari remembers the mahi of his parents and ancestors who had petitioned for the return of land so long ago. He was happy to see it finally come back.
Pai ana rātou kia tū mai ki te whakahe te rā. Nō rātou na wā rātou nei kōrero. Engari tōku nei kitenga, te roa o mātou tūpuna, e petihana ana mō ngā whenua. I roto I ngā kōrero tēnā petihana, whakahokia mai wa mātou whenua. I tēnei rā ko whakahokia mai ngā whenua.
The Crown makes the following apology to the whānau of the hapu and iwi of Ngāti Kāhu ki Whangaroa.
You can either refuse to settle and keep on talking, or bite the bullet, get the settlement done and then move on from there. There comes a time when you just can't keep talking, you've got to do things, and that's what the negotiators have recognised here.
Am I happy with it? Well, I suppose it's better than nothing.
We went into this claim with about 5% of the rohe still in Māori land ownership. We're coming out of it with about 15%. There are 3 parcels of land which are farms which are coming back to us. A significant amount of coastline back, because we're buried in the past in caves on the coast. So those are tapu places for us. We have protocols in terms of our dealing with a variety of ministries. They're required to ensure that, Ngāti Kahu ki Whangaroa, our voice is heard and represented, and that's a very positive thing. The cultural redress, which is acknowledgement of your mana whenua over mountains and bays, is I think as important. And the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, is the historical account. That is the mutually agreed true history of your tribe and how it came to lose its mana and its rangatiratanga. The role that the government played in that and the apology as a consequence of those grievances. That is the stuff that I think 100, 500, 1,000 years from now, our tribes people will be able to look at and know this was the point where the Crown acknowledged what it had done to us and what it owed us.
We come so far and we've got a way to go. Well, it ain't easy. No, there's more go on the parchment.
Well, my hopes and aspirations for the future is that we can actually create employment for our tamarikis up here.
If I were asked how I think I went, I would put my marking hat on and give myself a B-. I didn't get all the things I wanted for my tribe. I wasn't able to contribute to solving some of the internal issues that still plague the tribe. And I probably got grumpy far too many times and should have been much more gracious and honourable and gorgeous like some of my ancestors. I just got grumpy and shitty.
She's a good straight shooter, she's honest, and she's called a spade a spade. I think she's done as well.
I'd like to think that most people recognise that I did what I did because I wanted the best for my tribe.
Whether or not you agree with the process, whether or not you agree with the people, if we don't start moving forwards, then there's nowhere else to go but backwards.
I can only see good and not bad because, to me, this is a spiritual journey, and I'm honoured to be on that.
I just want my as yet unborn grandchildren and great-grandchildren to look at their whakapapa with pride and know who they are and where they come from, even if they never are even born in this country, because our mokas are going to be global. And these documents around treaty settlements are so important for part of that story. I can go back easily 200 years to tell you what they were doing in my family. I'd like to think 200 years from now, one of my descendants is still going to have access to this story on their tablet or whatever technology they're using then to tell their children about where your great-grandparents and grandparents came from. That's immortality to me.
The Ngāti Kahu ki Whangaroa claim took over 30 years from the time it was submitted. Financial redress to the iwi was $6.2 million, with $300,000 transferred as a cultural fund. In 2018, Ella Henry was elected a trustee of Kahukura Ariki Trust, which manages the post-settlement assets. A very special thanks to Rawiri Henare, Peter Pangari and Professor Ella Henry. Thanks for listening to The Negotiators, produced by Tāwera and Black Pearl Productions, made with the support of NZ On Air and RNZ. You can find the podcast on the RNZ website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Tēnā koutou irirangi te motu I te pūtia tautoko ka rawe.